Hello, listeners. I'm your host, Jayasree, and you're listening to TALRadio powered by Touch a Life Foundation. Welcome to Leadership for Life with Kyra Cavanaugh, President of 15B Wellbeing, a company dedicated towards creating learning experiences for leading corporations, workplaces, teams, groups, and individuals. Because they believe that no one should sacrifice well being for performance. In today's interview, our focus is going to be on the balance between leadership and parenting. How can one find that harmony? Might sound a little peculiar because many a times when we hear successful people talking about their journeys, there is definitely something that they mention about their kids, about how they might have missed out on certain sweet moments with them, how they might have behaved in a different manner if given a chance again, or the things that they have done exceptionally well during their parenting phase. So let us unveil one by one with our wonderful Kyra here. And without any further delay, let's welcome her onto our show. Hello, Kyra. Thank you for being back with us.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back and talking about this today.
Wonderful. I thought you're the perfect person I would want to talk this topic with. And that's really confusing when you hear a lot of people discuss about things like this, parenting and leadership together. Because we have spoken a lot about working mothers and how does a woman juggle between her work, her family, her children, and everything. I get that, but living on a day-to-day work, 8-hour job, you drive to your work, you do your 8-hour shift, and then drive back home, and then have your family, the stress and everything. Yes, that's a part. But when you're a leader, when you're an entrepreneur, when you have the responsibility of many, many, many people who are reporting to you, and then you're a parent as well. We are not we are not describing any gender role here. Parent in general, could be a father, could be a mother, both in general. So this is very, very critical phase for them, because especially when they have younger children, and when they have children that need attention, and the parents cannot really afford to let go of their hard earned business or the company that they have set up so far. So let's talk more about this, Kyra, today.
That sounds great. We'll jump in.
Awesome. Yes. So my first question to you, without any delay: how do successful leaders maintain a balance between their professional responsibilities and their role as parents? And what strategies can be adapted from one domain to the other?
Okay, well, let's jump in and get started. I'll start by just sharing with you that I'm the mother of 3 young adult sons. So I have some perspective on this, having been both a stay-at-home parent for a few years, being a part-time working parent, being a full-time working parent, both in my corporate career. Also, I started a business when I was in my childbearing years, and sold a business while I had children, built another business. So I have lots and lots of experience personally. In my last business, I also we had coaches that we offered to organizations to provide coaching for these exact conflicts. So, and I've also done lots and lots of workshops on the topic for my corporate clients. So I have a perspective here that I hope can help. So there are a couple of things that I think can really be beneficial to managing this conflict. Now, that's not to presume it's always a conflict, but the reason I use the word conflict is because there are multiple things, factors, desires, logistical issues, etc., that can be in opposition and not always in harmony when we're managing our work and our parenting. And a researcher and friend of mine who's at Purdue University in the US here, Her name is Ellen Kosick. And years ago, she wrote this book called The CEO of Me, in which she talked about the research she's done around work-life conflict. And she identified that some of us are segregators. So in answer to your question, a segregator would defines work as work and personal life as personal life, including child rearing, and they're segregated or separate. And so people who naturally feel most calm and in the least amount of conflict when they're separating those two can end up benefiting from creating routines, boundaries, and support that allows them to work when they're working and raising kids when they're raising kids. Others are integrators. And integrators see work and life as commingled. So you might be playing with your child or having your child sit with you while you're also doing your work, and it may not really create a lot of stress for integrators because they don't see those very super strong boundaries and need for that boundary control. So for me to suggest to you, if you're more of an integrator, that you should set very strong boundaries between your work and your family life may not resonate, may not feel appropriate. And then the third group she identified are people for whom neither pattern is the consistent way that they like to manage it, and instead they vacillate. So some of you listening may move from being a segregator to being an integrator and back and forth, and you may move through that very fluidly, and that may be the way that you find works best for you to manage the potential conflict. And then, of course, anytime we set up anything in opposition, we recognize everyone can be somewhere on the continuum. So Dr. Kosick basically asserts that we do best in this conflict when we understand our style and we organize ourselves around that style. So that hopefully that can be helpful. She created a survey, a quiz that's in that book that can help you identify your natural style.
Absolutely wonderful. I have never imagined it to be so difficult. And so how do we put it? I really love the term the segregator and the integrator, because it makes a lot more sense when you give a name to what you're doing, and how you can work it out. So I think I am the third kind.
A mix of both.
Yeah, but I am sure I'm going to learn more by the end of our session. So I am hopeful. Okay, so moving on to my next question. There are a lot of challenges that everybody, like each one of us, face with multiple things. But then when it comes to balancing the leadership commitments and the parenting duties, what are the potential challenges with them, and how can individuals effectively navigate these challenges?
Yeah, so the challenges come from identifying as both a parent and a leader, which means having multiple constituents and lots of work to do. Let's just be frank. So the question that I would ask myself is, do I recognize and acknowledge how much pressure and how much stress is on me because of these dual roles? And am I aware of my needs? We'll talk about that more in a little more detail in a minute. But am I aware of my needs? Am I aware of my children's needs, my workers' needs, my manager's needs, et cetera, et cetera? And how do I prioritize all of this? There's so much. And so to really manage through successfully in these dual roles requires similar skills to the skills we use in either of those roles. So let me give you an example. If we went to work and our desk is very messy, and some of your desks may be very messy, it can be very hard to find things. And it may take time when you're switching from one task to the next to have to sort of sift through everything, find what you need, and then begin the task. So it may be in that case that you identify getting yourself very organized so you can create some efficiency so that switching can happen more quickly may be beneficial to you. So then how can you take that same concept and apply it to your dual roles? How can you take the way that you organize yourself at work and bring that into your personal life, into your role as a parent? Now, for me, I kind of went overboard in both directions. So, needing efficiency to save time and stay organized while I had all of these things pulling at me at once seemed like that would be a skill I could bring into parenting. Except as I look back now, I think, did I really need to be as efficient as I was as a parent? I was a stay-at-home parent, and I would never take my kids to the pool or to do fun things. I shouldn't say never, but I didn't really prefer it because I wanted to get all of the things taken care of at home. So I would say clearly there are transferable skills between work and parenting and leading. And we also want to watch that we're not overdoing it or over-applying a skill that works in one area if it's creating restrictions or constrictions or isn't working for your family, for example, like in my case.
Understood that. So it's extremely important that we make sure we draw a line between what we are doing and be more organized so that it gets easier for us to shift between the tasks, as you beautifully explained. Pretty much, yeah. Pretty good. And in what ways can these skills and qualities cultivated through leadership roles contribute to more effective parenting and vice versa?
So I think it's important to identify what do you mean by effective parenting, because each one of us is going to define effective parenting differently. So in my example, I defined effective parenting as having organized children whose clothes matched and were clean and sitting in drawers and from which they could choose, right? Somebody else may not care about that at all. So I think it's really beneficial for you to stop and ask yourself what actually matters. Because let's be frank, there are too many things to do, and there are too many constituents needing your time and pulling you potentially in different directions. So what are the top 3 characteristics of an effective parent for you? And identify those, have conversations about those 3 things with the people you're co-parenting with or who are caring for your children. Be very clear. Another skill you can use from leadership is mission, vision, values statements. So we've talked about this in other episodes, but what is your mission as a family? What is your goal? Why are you a family? And what ultimately, when you look back on your family, what do you want to be able to say about your family? Or very active, or very service-driven, or very observant religiously, or what is that goal? Because once we identify a goal, then we can rally around and use it as the organizing principles for every choice that we have to make. What is your vision? What kinds of kids do you want to raise? When we're clear about that, when we talk about that as a family, and I've actually worked with parents to memorialize that. Could you as a family draw out, your mission statement or your vision for your family? And could everybody do the art project together? This would be really fun with little kids, right? Or you could have all of your children, create what that vision means to them in artwork or in song, and then bring that all together and play that regularly or hang it in a place that's a communal place in your home. So everybody remembers when things get tough, this is what we're striving for. So what is your vision of a happy family and healthy children? And then what are our values? We've talked about values before, Jayasree, and it's wonderful to have conversations with kids about their values, about what values you want to embrace as a family. So your value may be love, okay? What does that look like? You can ask your child, what does love look like for you? And have them express that. And then we make decisions, choices as a family. We engage everybody in activities and choices that support those values. So those organizing principles we use at work in leadership can be extremely beneficial at home, and you can really engage children, grandmothers, aunties, uncles, grandfathers, nannies, babysitters, sister-in-laws that are helping out, whoever is involved, to really convey this is what we're about. And then from there you can create rules to live by, behavioral expectations, and you just cascade it all the way down, so that when your child is throwing a temper tantrum about why they don't want to go outside and do whatever it is, as a family you can say, let's go look at the picture we painted about what it means to be a family. Do you remember? Do you remember what that means? What does that mean to you? And can you be helpful in our family by going ahead and putting your shoes on? So it's not always going to work, but at least it provides a guiding light, especially when times get challenging.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And the second part of my question, I'm interested to know more about that. How can your parenting skills and qualities help in your leadership roles?
Well, what are we required to do as parents? What qualities do we develop in ourselves as parents? I mean, how would you answer that question? I'll flip it back to you for a moment. I've got some ideas as well.
Okay, so now that you asked me about it, for me, I am a mother of two. My elder is 6 and my younger is 3. So right in this particular phase, I am in the most essential quality that I'm cultivating myself is patience.
There you go.
Patience, and that abundance of patience you need to answer their repetitive questions, because they're at an age where they have too many questions to talk about, too many things that they want to know, too many things that they want to ask you about. So that I personally feel I need that amount of patience to be able to answer them quietly every time, and not be agitated or not be frustrated just because my son asked me the same question 5 times already, and answer it in probably a different way so that he gets it this time. So yeah, that's one thing that I have personally been struggling with, and I think I'm kind of working on it a little better these days. So yeah, that's about for me. And over to you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So patience, and then how do we I would say that too, how do we bring that and apply that at work? Oh my goodness. Someone who's really annoying in a meeting, or a situation that happens, or an employee who's struggling, we can bring that patience as leaders into those situations. For me, I'd say parenting has taught me immense amounts of humility, especially as I see my children grow and seeing the mistakes I made and seeing the amazing choices that I accidentally fell into that worked out well. Actually, very little of it was probably in our control in some respects. So learning to let go, recognizing that sometimes we don't like it, but we do it anyway. Sometimes we have to wait, delayed gratification, to see how today's actions will play out in the lives of our children. And all of those skills can be applied at work. We can become calmer. We can learn to let go of things we can't control. We can stop wasting time, right? We can form deep bonds and connections with other parents or people who want to learn more about our lives as parents. So to me, when we start out this conversation about how we have separate identities, work or parent, isn't it amazing to think about, in answer to your question, how those roles actually are intertwined and how those roles influence both of the sides, right? I mean, we're multidimensional, but for this conversation, the parenting versus work side, for me, I think it's made me a much, much better leader, much more compassionate, much more aware of my own shortcomings, recognizing that I am not the only one with the answers, and creating spaces that enable people to come together and to contribute, similar to how when we engage our children and all of the people that we're raising our children with, how we can learn from each other. We can learn from our elders. We can learn from other parents and the way they're doing things. And through that experience, really formulate a viewpoint and opinion about how we want to be as leaders and as parents.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for answering it for me. It helps me a lot personally as well. So thank you.
Good, of course.
Another area where there are a lot of conflicts that arise is prioritization. Balance is, okay, it's there. We've spoken about it a bit already, but prioritization, how does prioritization differ between leadership responsibilities and parenting obligations? Because you might have an important board meeting and your son might actually be in a football match. He might have urged you to come watch the match for him, which is actually a very big thing for him. And you are stuck at a board meeting and both are important. You know that within yourselves, but how do you prioritize? And what kind of technique can help individuals achieve that beautiful, sweet balance in both domains?
Recognize your default. Does your default tend to be to always say yes to the family? Or is your default to always say yes to work or be more likely to say yes to one or the other? It can help us to know our default so that we can know where that bias is when that question is asked. And then identify, are you comfortable with that bias? Is it balanced enough for you? And if the answer is no, why is that? Are you afraid of showing up as or coming across as undedicated at work? Are you really, as your primary priority family, and work just really isn't that important to you? So there's no right or wrong here, but I think getting really clear about where your bias toward action is, and then identify, do you want to make a change? So in other words, if I tend to always say yes to the boss and rarely say yes to my child, in your example, how do I feel about that? Is there an opportunity to adjust? How does my family feel about it? Because those are more data points that can help. And then, do I want to make a change? And if you want to make a change, what's keeping you from making the change? So we can be open and honest about that. And then, how are you going to make the change, and how are you going to make the change stick? And that's where I would suggest an accountability partner can be very helpful, especially one in your family, right? Children are very good accountability partners, because if you say, I will come up and read a story to you in 10 minutes, and it's now a half an hour, they're going to come and say, come on, when you told me you were going to read me a story, right? I would also say along those lines, be a person of your word. And what I mean by that is only commit to what you can honestly commit to. When we have lots and lots of things going on and it can be very hard to prioritize, prioritization is saying yes to one thing, which means no to something else. And some of us are very uncomfortable saying no. So recognize if you are always saying yes, there is a flip side to that. You are also saying no. And so sometimes prioritization and a technique you can use is, if I say yes to my son to go to his game, what am I saying no to? I'm saying no to the reception, the Thursday night reception after work or whatever it is. And then being really crystal clear about that, how do I feel about that choice? Because if we're just only looking at the yes side of the equation, then we're the cause and effect, creating cause and effect always. What's the effect? If we're not really willing to look at the effect and consider that effect on ourselves and each other, then we're not going to be as good at prioritizing, or we may resist it. One other technique I'd recommend is the 10-10-10 rule. So when you're trying to prioritize and make a decision, think about how will the decision feel in 10 minutes. So if I say yes to my boss and I say no to my child, for the first 10 minutes, this is going to feel really uncomfortable. Okay. How will you feel about it 10 weeks from now? Well, let's say this is the only one of their games that you can't make. And by 10 weeks from now, this will be long forgotten. Then maybe it makes it easier for you to prioritize going ahead and doing the work thing. And then how will you feel 10 years from now about this? In the grand scheme of raising your kids, will this one time really be a problem? So it can give us perspective beyond sort of the immediate feeling that comes from having to make a decision when we prioritize.
Makes wonderful sense. And the way you have encapsulated this technique is actually more interesting, because sometimes we when you are the boss and you are really needed, and you are the person who's actually taking care of something really important at that particular moment, and then you have your children also, vice versa again, when you have that being pre-planned already, and then you have an unexpected meeting coming up, or some other work that you have to work around with. So in such scenarios, this particular techniques that you have mentioned will definitely be handy, and I think I'll use them soon. So thank you so much for mentioning those. For my last question to you, Kyra, we have spoken about self-care already, and we have spoken about how we need to take care of ourselves in certain scenarios. But then when you're balancing parenting and leadership, we are being very specific here. We are not talking about family as a whole, but we are specifying parenting. So, what role does self-care play in maintaining balance between leadership and parenting roles? Because both exhaust you in a good way, I can say, not in a way to complain, but because parenting needs that amount of energy in you, definitely. The 100% focus there as well. So, how can leaders model healthy habits for their children while managing a demanding professional commitments?
3 words: stop being selfless. In these roles, it is so easy to give ourselves away. Give away our time, give away our energy, give away all of our resources. And it can leave us feeling exactly what you said: exhausted, depleted, burned out, despairing. It can also, there are so many joyous moments as well. I'm not trying to paint a negative picture, but when we are selfless, we are not serving anyone. You're not serving yourself, and you're not serving any of your constituents, your family members, people at work. So stop doing it. Own your choices and make choices based on what you need. You have to put yourself first, because you are limited in your resources. You are here for a finite amount of time. So own the choice. rather than feeling like a victim or a martyr, making yourself small. I can't do this. I feel powerless. I feel overwhelmed. Nope, pull yourself up. I am the master of my time. I am the master of time and space. And when you pull your shoulders back and you pull your head up and you sit up straight or you stand up straight, then you start to build that sense of power. I get to choose me. Because it's so easy as a parent, it's so easy at work to just get swept up in everybody else's needs, demands, desires, etc. Stop. Right now, from here on in, stop. You made a choice. Own the choice. If you are not choosing for yourself, change your choice. When we give more than we receive, it's unhealthy. Receiving is not selfish. Receiving is survival, is thriving, is showing up as the leader and the parent that you want to be. And showing up strong and powerful means owning your choices. It means prioritizing. It means setting boundaries so that you can do that self-care. Because when you are rested, when you have taken a walk in the woods, whatever it is that you love to do, gone fishing, you come back a happier, more productive person and more able then to give. But we've got to be receiving, and that's what self-care is. And it's not selfish. Anyone who is listening, who is claiming that taking care of yourself is selfish, stop. Just stop. Stop. It's a way, it's serving you. Figure out how it's serving you to be selfless, and just stop. You have made these choices. You are powerful. You absolutely can do this. And yes, you'll be exhausted. And yes, you'll be despairing. And yes, you'll be dismayed. It's part of being a parent. It's part of being a leader. It's not always easy. But when you practice self-care, you know the things you can do quickly and easily to get back to a place of equilibrium or a place of joy and continue to move forward.
Brilliant. That's the only word I can say, because that's so beautifully put together by you. And I absolutely adore you for this reason, Kyra. And I thought you were the very best person for me to have this conversation with. And yes, I am right. So I'm really happy about that. Thank you so much for your time and energy today as well. It was wonderful talking to you. And thank you so much for this thought-provoking, much insightful and much needed conversation. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. So for all our listeners out there, I hope you have a fair understanding about what Kyra was trying to explain today about being a segregated parent or an integrated parent or a mix of both, and how you can actually prioritize by identifying your own choices and or not being guilty about taking care of yourself, to say, and make sure that we recognize our own self, our own identity separately, which is a lot more easier from all the conversation that I had just now. That's my understanding so far. So I believe you will be able to do wonders with this. Don't carry the baggage. Work is work. Kids are kids. Don't carry the baggage here to there and there to here, which will all the more entangle us in this never-ending cycle. So yes, let's be better parents and let's be better leaders as well. So thank you so much for listening to our episode today. And that was Kyra Cavanaugh for all of you. And you're listening to TALRadio, powered by Touch a Life Foundation. This is your host, Jayasree, signing off for today. Stay tuned and keep learning.